This episode of Bookworm is brought to you by AeroPress. Brew better coffee on the go with the new AeroPress Go Plus. Save 20% on your order by going to aeropress.com/bookworm. So I just got back from Craft and Commerce, and I have to tell a quick story here. Craft and Commerce is amazing. It's the ConvertKit conference, and if you are aspiring to make anything on the internet, you should totally go. But I was there, and I got there a day early. I like Boise a lot, so I just wanted to kind of be in the city and have a little bit of time to get my bearings. And I don't know, it just makes travel easier for me if I have some buffer before the actual conference starts. I'm an introvert, so I got to ramp up for all those people. So the first morning I was there, I went for a run on this area of the city they call the Greenbelt, which is like this big park that has a zoo and a band amphitheater sort of a thing and tennis courts and stuff like that. And then it kind of runs along this river. And so I really like that area. And so every time that I go to Boise, I try to go for a run on the Greenbelt. There's even some meetups that will specifically, they'll meet up and they'll go for a run on the Greenbelt before the sessions once the conference actually starts. But I got there the day before, and I'm running on the Greenbelt, and I'm listening to my podcast on my headphones, as I always do when I run. And I look to the left, and the road that's about maybe 8 feet from the trail that I'm running, walking the other way, is Ali Abdaal. And before I could think about it, because I'm just like, oh, hey, there's Ali. Because normally I would be like, I don't want to be that guy, right? I'm not going to go run up and interrupt his flow. He's got his like vlog camera, and I think he's practicing his talk because he's the closing keynote speaker. But I couldn't help myself, Cory. Before I could catch myself, I fanboyed, and I'm like, hey, Ali. But Ali is super cool. He stopped what he's doing, comes and talks to me. As soon as I realized what I'd broken his flow, I felt really bad. So I just kept it real short. But hey, really appreciate what you do. I'm here to see you. Like, oh, awesome. Well, we'll catch you later, And then I sent him a message via Twitter afterwards. And then he followed up with me via Twitter. And his response was, oh my gosh, you're the Bookworm guy. I've been listening to your podcast for years. So that was probably the highlight of my Craft and Commerce experience, even though it wasn't direct. It's like I got to meet Ali Abdaal and confirmed that he does, in fact, listen to Bookworm. So Ali, thanks for listening.
There you go.
And thanks for saying hi at Craft and Commerce. You did a great job on your keynote. That visualization exercise at the end was powerful. But yeah, if you are an internet creator, please come, hang out. We'll get coffee. It'll be great.
And it's every June. It's June every year.
Yeah, it's usually the second week in June. I don't think they have the page up to buy the tickets for next year yet, but I will be going. They did have a pre-buy thing at the conference, so I do already have my ticket for next year. I will be there, so come hang out.
How many people, roughly?
Oh gosh, only 200 to 300 would be my guess. It's a pretty small group, but they're pretty cool people. Also had dinner with Jay Papasan, author of The One Thing. Yeah. So it was a lot of fun. But we got lots of action items here. So you want to go through yours first?
I will. So my first action item was to apply scarcity to areas where I lacked moderation. Now, I am trying to do this. I think the biggest challenge that I've had with this one is staying mindful of the fact that I need to apply scarcity or that I lack moderation in an area. So it's like, you have so many of these ingrained grooves that you do. At this time I do this thing, and at this time I do this thing, and at this time I do this thing. So reminding myself that's hold on, you don't have moderation right now. What's happening here, and what is causing the scarcity loop, and what's underlying that scarcity loop. So I would say, if we're gonna red, yellow, green this, right, where green is I did a great job, yellow's meh, and red I'm somewhere between red and yellow, right? So not great on this one for sure.
Okay.
The take a month and try to get rid of one thing every day, this was just not possible right now. I failed to realize the amount of travel and the amount of things that we had going on for the month of May and June. So I think this one will hit in July. I will tell you, I did get rid of a bunch of stuff, but that just so happened to be because we had the dumpsters in our neighborhood. So our neighborhood, the HOA gets dumpsters every year. So we just had dumpsters. So we just threw away a bunch of old stuff that we didn't need anymore and stuff that was taking up space. So I did get rid of a lot of things, but it wasn't the way I had planned it, where, I tried to do an active or a, conscious getting rid of a thing every day. What about you?
Well, I think I didn't take action on any of these. No, that's not entirely true. I'll start with the revisiting my ideal week. I did do this. I did not get to the result that I wanted, which was 4 hours of creative work per day. I'm not sure that that's feasible right now. And I say creative work per day. I'm thinking of that as creative work on my projects and my products. I do quite a bit of freelance work currently as I'm trying to ramp up the independent creator business. So I don't really count that work because that's transactional. Once it's done, I get paid for that article. That's it. Um, I, yeah, it was kind of depressing as I was doing this, to be honest, but that's okay. Like, progress, not perfection. The flag is in the ground. Like, this is the direction that we're moving. And I'm very clear on this, come back from Craft and Commerce, talking to a bunch of people, going to a bunch of workshops. One of the most helpful workshops that I went to was Jay Klaus's workshop on developing your offer ladder. And I know specifically the pieces that I've got to build and the things that I've got to work on. Which, by the way, I forgot to mention, if people want my notes from Craft and Commerce, I took sketch notes of all the sessions. I shared them individually on Twitter, but I'll put a link to download all the notes if people want them in the show notes here. Next one, collect gear, not stuff. I mean, I guess you could say that's sort of successful. Like, I haven't just bought stuff. I have this mindset now when I'm looking at things, but I also haven't bought anything. I've been traveling, so we'll see.
Yeah.
The next one, working from the bottom up, decide on purchasing decisions within 60 seconds, avoid finding justification. I guess you could say I failed hard on this one because I walked out of Craft and Commerce thinking I should go to Vid Summit, and I'm still thinking about whether I should go to Vid Summit.
That's what is Good Summit?
Vid Summit is like a YouTube
Vid
conference.
Summit.
Yeah, it's a YouTube conference in Dallas in September, which is hosted by Mr. Beast, I believe. But a lot of the stuff that I'm doing in terms of growth is happening on YouTube, and I should know what's going on there. Maybe not to the tune of $900. That's what the ticket costs. And then obviously flights and hotel and things like that. I do know several people from Craft and Commerce that are going to be there. So I do think if I had the means, that's probably a good place to be. It's the right room to be in. I would learn a lot, but I'm just not sure that I can swing that yet. So still working on that one. So probably we can come back to this. We'll check the tape later, but my guess is that if you're talking about as it pertains to this action item, I will find a way to justify that cost at some point, and I will have failed on this action item.
I mean, I feel like you have to give yourself with that 60-second one. Like, you have to give yourself
There's a threshold there, maybe?
There's tiers, right? Like,
sure.
Okay, if it's under this much money, 60 seconds. If it's this one, then we can think about it longer, kind of thing.
All right, good. I feel better. And then the last one asked, do I want to be right? Do I want to be happy? This wasn't an actual asking myself that question. This has been in the back of my mind, but again, been traveling, so I haven't had a whole lot of application or opportunity to apply that action item personally. So I look at this list and I'm like, I didn't do any of this, but I sort of did one of them, and the other ones didn't really have an opportunity. So I don't think I'm going to have any of these carry over, but definitely didn't get the big payoff that I thought I was going to get when I listed these as action items a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat that I think the one that would carry over more likely is the try to remember where I lack moderation, and then like what's the loop underlying that?
Yeah.
I need to get rid of a bunch of stuff, but I don't think it's going to happen.
All right. Well, let's talk about today's book. Today's book is Radical Candor by Kim Scott. And this was a book that I was familiar with from the previous day job. although I had not read it for the previous day job. I always kind of wanted to. They had core values for the company that were all based on books, and most of them were based on books that I had read. This one was not one that I had read, but it's also like 300 something pages. So every time I was like, I should read that, I quickly got overwhelmed and didn't do it. So a few weeks ago, you were talking about books that you were interested in, and you made a comment, or maybe it was in the midst of an episode, about how you were interested in like the team culture stuff. And I had, gone through the Cliff Notes version and some trainings on Radical Candor, but I had not invested the time to actually read the book. And I was like, oh, well, this seems like a good one. So I picked it, and we went through it. Now, which version did you read, by the way? Because the one that I got is this orange one that says fully revised and updated edition. Is that the one that you have?
Correct.
Okay.
That is the one I have, yes, as well.
Okay, so I think this one is quite a bit longer. It's broken down into essentially two main parts. Part one is a new management philosophy. Part two is tools and techniques. But then there are a couple of additional sections, getting started, and afterward, and then a bonus chapter in the one that I've got. So that's kind of, I think, how we'll break down the chapters for the podcast episode. We probably won't go chapter by chapter in each one of these sections because a lot of it flows together, but we will see. What was your initial thoughts picking up this book?
Okay, so I had heard of this book I don't even remember where I heard about this book, but it's like I actually didn't have much interest in the book itself or the topic, right? So I had heard of it before, but it was like, yeah, okay, whatever. I'm not interested in it. So I don't know it. I didn't know anything about Kim Scott. I didn't know anything about Radical Candor or what the premise was. But I've since found out that, like, and as you just said, this is like a way of thinking framework that's very, very popular in industry. Like, I mean, this is, trainings. And I mean, she talks about in her book that, they've done a lot of coaching sessions with managers and bosses and leaders. I didn't have any idea that it was so focused on being a boss and managing, right? Like, so that was kind of a shock to me. So like that was my first impression going into it. Is I knew very, very little about it, but I knew what the word candor meant. Like I knew what the word, well, at least I thought I knew what the word radical meant. And I thought I knew what the word candor meant. And then she helped me learn more about that. So,
well, that's the thing is like you see the model even, and you say to yourself, "Oh, I understand this," but you don't understand it. Yeah. She's got 300 pages to show you how little you understand it. She does a really good job of it, by the way. You are right that this is something that is used a lot in industry. In fact, I was at a session at Craft and Commerce led by Barrett Brooks, and Barrett Brooks is sort of an operations guy. He was the COO for ConvertKit, and then he left to do his own thing, and now he coaches entrepreneurs in helping them develop better teams. And the session that he led was really good. One of my favorite sessions while I was there. But he brought up Radical Candor in that session. He showed the matrix. And everybody who was there with me saw that I actually had the book with me at the Airbnb. Like, oh, look, it's Radical Candor. I'm like, yeah, I understand it now. So
yeah, I told a guy this morning that we were going to talk about this book today, and he goes like, "Oh yeah, we do those trainings all the time." He's like, "I don't ever go to them, but we do those trainings all the time."
Yeah. Well, people should go to the trainings, I feel, because this is something even at the day job that we struggled with. People thought they knew what it meant, and I think if you dive into it, you recognize that it's not exactly what you think it is. And so when I read this, I had context of having all those discussions and working through things with the day job experience, and could identify the people that fit into every single one of those quadrants. I'm going to do my best to leave the personal experiences out of this and talk generally.
That was my hardest part of this book. I was like, oh, I know so-and-so, or, oh, this situation happened, and that is an example of this. And I was like, Cory, you need to stop doing this and just take what you can take from the book. Stop like assigning, because it's kind of judgmental, right? Like that I'm putting people, but at the same time, you're processing through your mental, your mental model. So,
well, that was one of the things like Barrett Brooks shared about Radical Candor, and he shared about the different axes and the different quadrants. And you could see the people that were there that had a team, they they got all excited and they were just going to take this back and share it with the team. And as soon as they shared the model, they assumed that things were going to click. They didn't say that, but that is totally what was happening. I could see it in their eyes. And as the discussion evolved, I actually jumped in at one point for a little bit, but Barrett did a good job of funneling it this way too. It's really what the standard that you are holding as a manager or as an executive, someone with authority in the organization. You can't just say this stuff and be like, okay, this is what people should do. They should be radically candid. That sounds good, but it's not what you profess or what you hold up as the ideal. It's really what you tolerate. It's the things that you allow to happen on the bottom end of that scale that can sabotage this whole thing. If you really want radical candor, then you can't let anybody act as the obnoxious jerk, right? Just as an example, if you allow that in your company culture, it will permeate. And then you've got this dissonance. Well, they say this, but they do another thing. And then people don't know what to believe. So I think that's an important caveat as we get into this, is that a lot of this is idealistic and it's going to take time to get to this point, or to get to the point where this is actually being practiced in your organization. If it's something that you want to implement, ultimately you can only do what you can do. And you really need to do your best to make sure that you are living this out authentically 100% of the time. 95% is not good enough. Or if you make a mistake, you got to call yourself out in front of your team if this is really the behavior that you want to see. They need to know this is the standard. This is where the bar is always going to be. The minute that they have to guess, it's not going to work.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the whole first part, that preface where she is commenting on the fact that I wrote this book and now I'm writing the revised version of this book and here's all the stuff we've learned. That was really interesting to read, not having read the initial book and not having gone into that, because it was like, oh, well, this has had a pretty significant impact on people and people have interpreted it incorrectly, right? They've tried to use it and apply it incorrectly. So I liked that actually, because it made me pay attention and it probably made me, I don't want to say take more seriously, but it made me really go, oh, I need to think about this in practice, not just as a framework that I can apply this piece and this piece, but not really worry about this other piece. It's like, no, I really need to think about this. So I liked, I liked that she made it more serious in that preface section.
Yeah, you got to be all in with this, which I guess we should probably talk about the model. So let's get into part 1, which is a new management philosophy. Now, in part 1, there's several chapters. Chapter 1 is build radically candid relationships. Chapter 2 is get, give, and encourage guidance. Chapter 3 is understand what motivates each person on your team. Chapter 4 is drive results collaboratively. This is a master's course in team performance. It's not just a simple framework that you can use. So we're definitely not going to get into all of this, although I can tell you as a former integrator, so essentially like a COO with an operational focus in an agency setting, the stuff that she shares in all these different areas is very good. Yeah. That you could learn a lot from any one of these chapters, any one of these ideas, but I think we're going to kind of focus on, at least to start, the core framework, and then we'll see where it goes from there.
Well, and let me interrupt for a second. I think her pedigree or her background is important because she comes from startups. She goes to Google. She works at Apple, and it's not the big names. That's not what I'm saying is the important part. What I'm saying the important part is the different experiences she would have gotten at each of those things. A small startup operates in a certain way. Google, from the way she describes it, was very, very different operationally than Apple was, but at the same time, she was a boss and a manager at all of these different things. So I guess the best way I can describe it is refined through fire, right? She had all of those different experiences to mess up and to learn and to grow, to then be able to come and tell us in this context, in this context, in this context. And she's very, very open about I screwed up here. this happened and I still feel bad about it today. This happened
Hmm.
and I found out that 10 years later the person's doing great, and man, that was a big relief because, I was really really stressed out about how poorly I handled that situation. So it's like I really like her candor, right? For lack of a better way to put it, like in terms of explaining to us what she's been through, where she's been through those things. And it didn't feel like I'm bragging about the fact that I've worked at Google and Apple and been in leadership, on the AdSense team and those type of things. It more felt like, here's why I know this and here's why I can speak to this situation, which I liked, right? Like it wasn't a braggadocious kind of thing.
Yeah, she shares a lot of mistakes that she's made, but she's also very successful. You mentioned Google, where she worked under Larry Page. She worked at Apple, and she's had a lot of different experiences. She shares a lot of the interactions she had with her former bosses, and shares what she learned from those interactions, which was really cool. I think regardless of the situation, there's a lot that you can learn from the stories that she tells there for sure.
All right, Mike, what's the model?
Yeah, the model is the standard 2x2 grid. I guess though it's not like a box. You've got these arrows on the x-axis, so the one that goes across the middle, you've got challenge directly, and so on the left side is you're not challenging directly. On the right side, you are challenging directly, and then on the y-axis, so from bottom to top, you have care personally. And what that does is it creates these 4 different boxes of the different combinations of caring personally and challenging directly. Now, if you care personally and you challenge directly, you end up in the upper right quadrant, which is radical candor. If you care personally but fail to challenge directly, you end up in the upper left quadrant, which is ruinous empathy. If you challenge directly but you don't care personally, you end up in the lower right. That is obnoxious aggression. And then if you don't care personally or challenge directly, you end up in the lower left, which is the manipulative insincerity, or Barrett Brooks actually called this apathy, where you just don't care. And that is obviously a very dangerous place to be. Radical candor is obviously where you want to be. I'm going to ask you right now, if you had to pick between ruinous empathy or obnoxious aggression, which one would you pick?
I would probably pick obnoxious aggression.
Me too.
I mean, neither of them are good, but I think
Correct.
if you're asking me to rank them, I think obnoxious aggression is a little bit better than ruinous anything, right? Like when you put the word ruinous in there,
Yeah.
it's like, man, we're defeating ourselves. So
Well, the thing that is so dangerous about ruinous empathy, in my opinion, well, let's just break down what ruinous empathy is. It is being too scared to tell somebody that what they're doing is not good enough. And to understand why that is important, you kind of have to back up a little bit to the first thing she mentions in chapter 1 about being a boss. Being a boss is emotional labor. And a boss is someone who guides a team to achieve results. So that's not just a boss at work. Like you could be a boss in a lot of different areas. You could be the boss of your family. You could be the boss of a nonprofit organization, a boss of a ministry, right? So it's someone who guides a team to achieve results. Guidance means feedback. Team building, you're guiding this team, right? You have to figure out who are the right people in the right roles. And then to achieve results, that's kind of self-explanatory. Okay, so let's go back to ruinous empathy. There are so many things that could be out of place with the organizational structure. And ruinous empathy is being unwilling to address them because you don't want to hurt somebody's feelings. Let's say you've got somebody who has worked at the place a long time and they're a great person. Everybody loves them. But the whole structure of the organization has changed and there just really isn't a job for them anymore. The tendency can be, well, let's create a job for them. There are these things that we have to do. Surely we can find something that's valuable to the organization for that person to do. But the problem with that is that you end up focusing on the wrong things. You have people who are doing these things that really aren't attached to the bottom line for the organization. Why is that a problem? Because what's good for how's that saying go? What's good for the hive is good for the bees.
Okay.
If the company goes under, then everybody feels this.
Yeah.
So it's almost like you can't take this so isolated focus and just this one person in this one relationship. You have to recognize that there are a whole bunch of other people that are going to be impacted by every decision that I make as a manager or as a leader. And I have to do right by everybody in addressing these things that are going to ultimately long-term hurt the organization. So I agree with you. I think ruinous empathy is the worst one, just because it's so easy to fly under the radar. It's really not that big a deal. Now, obviously, you do need to be able to tell what is actually a big deal and what's not. And I have been I've been in the wrong in terms of just like making everything a big deal. This is wrong. It has to be fixed. Well, maybe not. Going back to my action, I do I want to be right or do I want to be happy?
Yeah.
Sometimes you gotta let some things go, but the things that really matter, you can't let them go. You have to address them.
Well, and I think, another way I thought about ruinous empathy was like enabling, right? Like the fact that we're not addressing the situation, we're enabling the person to, in a work environment, right? We're enabling the person to continually underperform, which in the long run hurts everybody, right? So it either hurts the business in terms of staying in business. It hurts the culture for sure, because everybody looks and goes, listen, everybody knows so-and-so's not doing what they're supposed to be doing. And if they're getting away with it, well, can't I get away with it too? And, or they just get bitter about it, because she has a whole section in there where she talks about bitterness and those type of things. I think stepping back a little bit, I like that in the preface, she talks about this word radical and what radical is and what radical's not. And the fact that she uses the word radical, and she actually makes the statement, to me, the word radical indicates a management philosophy that is both new and dramatically different from what came before. So it's like, it's not this management philosophy that's supposed to be like, what's the word? Like, so out there that like, oh my gosh, I can't believe we're doing this. Like, no, this actually makes sense. It's a logical way to think about, I care personally about somebody and I challenge them directly, right? Like, that's not a radical way of thinking, but it's radical to management. Like, so I want to make sure that, as people listen to this, it's not like some like, oh my gosh, it's so crazy and out there. It's more just a matter of it's so different than what everything that came before it was, that's why she called it radical candor.
Well, I think it is a little bit radical because you can think about this in terms of the results or in terms of the people. I think those are the two common ways that people would prioritize. And radical candor is kind of both. It's recognizing that you are valuable and important as a person, but ultimately you have to produce too. Yeah. There are limitations with that in certain contexts. You're not kicking your kids out of the family because they're unproductive. Yeah, but when you're talking about an organization, that could literally be life or death situation for the organization if you continue to tolerate that unproductive state. Now, what's completely unfair though is if you hire somebody for a role and you're not clearly communicating to them that they are falling short of the standard, and that's what ruinous empathy is essentially, is like, you don't tell them that they're not doing a good enough job. You never give them a chance to rise to the occasion and do what's actually required. And then you let them go because they're failing to meet the bar and they feel blindsided and they're like, well, why didn't anybody ever tell me?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I've seen situations like that too, where you might look at the numbers and be like, this person is obviously falling short, but they don't know that they're falling short. Yeah. You have to clearly communicate. And that's the thing, the most important part of this, I feel, goes back to something she says at the beginning about the measure of radical candor gets measured at the listener's ear, not the speaker's mouth. So it doesn't matter what you say as a boss or a leader. What matters is what people hear. Now, obviously, there are limitations to this. You can do your very best and communicate effectively, all of these different things over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. You could do everything right. And if people still are just not getting it, then maybe they're not the right people. But I think more often we assume that because we said something once, that people attach to that, and they wrote it down on the stone tablets, and they know that this is the thing. It's not the thing. I remember listening to Sean McCabe talk about how you haven't communicated as a leader until you hear your vision coming back to you unprompted from people's mouths. Like they have to be saying it back to you without you asking for it. And that's the thing with radical candor is I feel like it's real easy to assume that because we talked about this in a town hall or we mentioned this once in a meeting, unless you are communicating directly with this person in like a one-on-one performance review, and then you're following that up with, let's look at the numbers and how are you doing? You're really doing people a disservice. That manager is doing that person a disservice if you're not measuring it by that critical number. And that's the thing is like everybody needs to have a number. One of the things that I've done since I left that job, I've done a little bit of operational consulting and I've helped people create scoreboards and things for their organizations. And I always ask them, like, what's the one thing you're focused on? What is it that you're trying to do? What's your one measure of success? Usually they say like sales or revenue, but that's a lag measure. That's not a good measure. You can't actually control that. So what is the thing that you can do that's actually going to move the needle for your business or organization? Okay, so that thing then, every person in every department has to have one number that they control that they can see how it's connected to that one so that they can see whether they are winning and whether the team is winning.
Yeah.
And ideally, when they win, the team wins.
Yeah. I think one of the things I realized through this first part is how difficult it is to walk the line of being a good boss, right? Like that it's really, really easy for me to not say enough, but it's also really, really easy for me to say too much, right? And you said that thing about like, you can't just say it once, but then there are those other things where you say it once and it sticks into somebody's brain and it messes with them for 5 years. And it was just a throwaway comment as you were, walking between your office and the coffee machine. So it's like,
Yeah.
It's such a fine line to walk to be a good boss. And it's not that you have to be perfect. It's just a matter of you really have to be intentional and you really have to think hard about the things you're doing, the things you're saying, as you said, the metrics that you're pushing, the things you're repeating, when you're repeating them, how you're repeating them. So it's like, I think one of the big benefits for me for reading this book was just thinking about being a boss, right? Because it's very, very directed towards you're a boss, you're a manager. Like it's very directed towards that audience. And for me to think about what that would be like and how would I operate in this situation or what would I do in this situation, like that was a really valuable thing for me to get from this book.
Well, I think there's a lot of places that you could apply it. As a professor, teacher, you could practice this with your students.
Absolutely.
Very first day of class, this is what's expected of you. If you do this, you will get these grades. If you don't, this is what will happen. And then when it gets to the end of the semester and people are scrambling, you can say, well, look, I told you, this is the expectation, you've fallen short. But just waiting till the end, waiting for them to fail isn't a good way to do it either. So when you see them starting to fall behind, you reach out to them and be like, hey, you should really come to an office hours, or if you need a little extra help, here's a resource. Then when it gets to the end of the semester, you can honestly say, I did everything that I could, because you can't do it for them. They have to actually apply it.
Yeah, the care personally one for most students, especially at a small institution like I'm at, is really easy, right? Like they get that we're here because we care about them. We want them to be here. We want them to succeed. The challenge directly one is a lot harder because they see challenge directly as you think I'm an idiot, or they see challenge directly as like, oh, I'm useless, I'm worthless, or whatever it is. And it's like, no, you just did that thing really wrong. And let's fix it. And it's not a matter of, you're still a wonderful person and I care deeply about you. You just did it really wrong, right? Like there's no, there's no other way to do that. So it's, that's the one that I actually, that's what I'm looking forward to working on in this coming year when the students come back to campus.
See, that's the thing, is that you can't wait until the perfect opportunity to have those conversations a lot of times. They mentioned, she mentions in chapter 2 that the need for honest communication doesn't always wait until you built a relationship. And this was something that I heard over and over and over again, is like, well, you got to build relationships. And I was doing my best to build relationships, but there were also issues that need to be solved.
Yes.
So let's talk about the issues, before 12 months from now I built a relationship. But then what does that look like? I mean, I guess there's an example here of caring personally and challenging directly as it pertains to telling somebody that their fly is down. Maybe we should just walk through these. This is pretty brilliant, I think. Radical candor, when you recognize that somebody's fly is down, is whispering to them, "Hey, your fly is down." Obnoxious aggression is, challenging directly but not caring personally. You shout in front of everybody, "Look, his fly is down."
Yeah, exactly.
If you care personally, but you don't challenge directly, you just don't say anything. You don't want to embarrass them. But the whole time they're standing up there giving their presentation and their fly is down.
Yep.
Like, that's not good either.
Mm.
And then manipulative insincerity, like, you're silent. You're worried about your own feelings. You're just so focused on yourself and how it's going to make you uncomfortable that you don't do anything. So this is really important. Like, I don't think it's an overstatement to say that everything rises and falls on this, because everything does rise and fall on leadership. And that's the other thing with radical candor, is this is not something you communicate to your team. Be like, "Okay, you guys, now you go be radically candid with me." No, you start by asking for criticism, not giving it. So you can't have the town hall and be like, "Now we're going to do radical candor. And I'm going to take the first step and I'm going to be candid with you." It's like I get this picture of Festivus from Seinfeld, the airing of grievances.
Yeah.
It's like, boy, do I got a lot of problems with you guys. That's what it comes across as if you don't invite it first.
Yep. It's easily going to come off as obnoxious aggression, right? Which is why I think she is so strong on, if you're going to implement this, you are the first person who gets, receives the radical candor. And you kind of learn through that, which, I like that a lot. I'll move us in. If you want to move us back, we can. I really liked the rock star versus superstar connection here in this first chapter, because I'd never heard anybody talk about that, but like that was in the back of my head, or I've experienced that before, where you just have people in the organization and it's like they're completely happy. They like where they are. They do a really good job. They are the rock of this division, right? Like, I mean, they turn that gear, they grind that thing, but things don't change frequently. Like, they know every year, this is what I'm going to do. It's going to be difficult. I'm going to do a good job at it, and everything's great. Then you have those other people that are like, "Man, I want to advance in this way. I want to move up in this way. I want to do this other thing, or I want to really, really nail that new project. I really, really want to nail that new grant or that new contract or whatever it might be." And like the operations that are kind of the underlying churn, those are fine. I'll do those, but I don't get as excited about those. Like those, so your rock stars are those first people that are like really good at what they're doing, and she refers to them, connecting them to the Rock of Gibraltar, right? So it's like they're stable, they're there, and they love it, and they just love it. And then your superstars are the ones that are like, "I'm looking for that next thing. I'm looking for the thing that's gonna jet the organization forward, or that's going to jet myself, or like personally advance my career." I really, really liked this framework. Like, I really like the way of thinking about these two people and these two groups of people, because it's just so real. I mean, you see those people all the time. And I like that she also acknowledges that it's not a static thing, that you're that forever. It might be a season of life, right? Like, so in this season of life, I'm a rock star. Why? Well, because in my personal life, all this other stuff is happening. So therefore, I'm not looking for craziness in my work life. I'm looking to be stable, do really good work, continue to do really good work. And then that season of life at home or personally ends, and now I'm looking to advance. Like, now I'm looking to roll through. And she talks about this with her own career, that she would hit different periods of this. And I think the reference she gave was children and spending time with her children, right? Like there were different times or different people and that she would supervise. So I really liked this example.
Yeah, there's two different paths here for the growth management matrix that she talks about, which is essentially the paths for the rock stars and the superstars. I thought this was pretty brilliant. So there's excellent performance and gradual growth. Those are really the rock stars. And those are people that you want to recognize, reward, but not promote. And then there's the excellent performance, steep growth, where you keep them challenged and unblocked. Two very important things that often get overlooked with both of these descriptions. Okay, the gradual growth. Recognize, reward, but don't promote. that reward piece is extremely important. And she calls this out in the book. You have to give them raises. You have to give them more than just the token gestures of, oh, hey, you're doing a good job. So the rock stars are not the people that you can just kind of set and forget.
Mm-hmm.
And then 20 years from now, they're still going to be doing the thing. This is not automated. These are people. These are relationships. It's tricky. People need to know that they're valued. You can't just forget about that. The other thing, and this is the one that really hits with me, because I think this is the one that I kind of identify as and I don't like the term superstar because I feel like that's kind of saying like I've achieved a certain level, but this mindset is there. I am constantly looking for the next thing. Even when I was at the day job, I was constantly looking for ways that I could learn more and do more. So keep them challenged and unblocked
Mm-hmm.
all the time.
Mm-hmm.
If whenever they hit a block, they get immensely frustrated.
Yeah.
I used to think this was like a character flaw for me, that I would get so frustrated when I would hit these roadblocks. And then I read this book and I was like, oh, actually, that's like, there's situations where this isn't the case, where you actually have people who are just looking to remove every roadblock that they can for you. And wow, what would that be like?
Yep.
And this isn't saying that you are a boss or a rock star or a superstar. I think, as you pointed out, people can go back and forth between these different roles. People are always changing, but this is the one that resonated with me. And as I am starting to build out a team around the stuff that I do, I think this is really important for me to make sure that I am not the roadblock for anybody at any time. And I know that's aspirational. It's never going to be perfect like that. I will be the roadblock. I know that. So then it's building in the systems where we can alleviate that stuff quickly. Like, one of the things I want to do at some point in the near future, whenever I can afford it, is to get an assistant. And when I get an assistant, like a full-time assistant, I will have at least weekly, maybe even, I've been thinking about maybe even daily meetings where it's simply, where are you stuck? And they can bring the agenda and they can point out, well, I need this from you. And on the call, we can get that for them. But the goal of those like unstuck calls is that they're only 10 to 15 minutes. I walk out of there like, these are the things that I need to do. And that becomes then my top priority. Everything else that I was going to do that day gets put on pause until I get my team unstuck.
Yeah.
And then I can go do the thing that I was going to do. And is that going to cause a short-term dip in productivity for the things that are the most important? Probably, because those systems and things don't exist yet. I'm going to have to craft that stuff as I work with the person. But that's okay, because I'm playing the long game. And I know that as we build those systems, this is going to become more and more efficient. And they're going to be able, as they get more comfortable, they're going to know, because I don't want to micromanage everything, to give them the authority and the decision-making guidelines and the SOPs to do all this stuff, that they can just handle it the way that they think is best. Yeah. And if they make a mistake, we'll talk about it. And well, I would have done it this way, and we'll change the SOP and they can do it better for next time. But the goal is to get out of the way.
Well, and I think this is where it ties in really well with slow productivity and the idea of that living document that sits up there that they can go in and say, here are the 4 different ways I'm stuck right now, or the 4 different ways I'm being slowed down. This is priority number 1, priority number 2, priority number 3, because I think when then that ties into you, because you look at that, when you've got 25 minutes of, you're not going to do anything like incredibly creative with that time, it's end of the day or whatever it is. Oh, but I can really knock that out. Like, I can knock out number 2 right now, right? Like, and I don't even have to have a meeting about it. I know it's there, but like, I think that's a great philosophy. The thing you made me think of when you said about bosses, superstars, rock stars, she calls out here that not everybody wants to be, she actually says not every superstar wants to manage, but like, I think it's more general than that. Not everybody wants to manage, and you have to be okay with that, right? Like, so this is a book for bosses. Bosses are always thinking about who's the next, rung of leadership on there. Well, there are certain people that just don't want to, and don't push them into it, because it's probably not going to end well. Let people do what they're really, really good at, which ties later into the book when you're having these conversations with people and you're really trying to understand their motivation and you're trying to understand their dreams and their desires, and that's what we have to do. But that's later on down the road. That's part 2. So
Yeah,
What
we
you
should probably
think?
get to part
Go ahead.
2 pretty quickly, but we should talk about the get stuff done wheel
Okay,
first.
I was gonna say, what do you think about the get stuff done wheel? So good. I'm glad we're on the same page.
Yeah, so this is essentially how you get buy-in from your team, where first you listen, and I like the definition she has for listening, which she got from Johnny Ive, giving the quiet ones a voice. I've definitely been in those meetings where it's like, okay, anyone have anything to say? And nobody says anything. And then eventually it's the same person or two that says the same thing every single time. You're like, well, I know what you think, but what does everybody else
Yeah,
think?
yeah,
It's like pulling teeth sometimes. So you listen, you clarify, you debate, you decide, you persuade, you execute, and then you learn. And then you go through it again. And I think this is a really cool model. I mean, that's a very brief summary, but I feel like she's got the real important steps there. The one thing, if I was to pick one thing from this model that is worth calling out, it's that persuade doesn't happen until the 5th step. Because I feel like it's easy if you're a boss, a visionary, or maybe you're just on the leadership team, and you've had this discussion about things and you just go to your meeting with your team and you instantly go into persuade mode.
yeah.
So there's a whole bunch of stuff that needs to happen before that. And it's not just at the very top level. I feel like this is really important at all levels of the organization.
Yeah, I thought about this wheel and I tried to overlay the 6 thinking hats on top of it and was like, all right, how do these two things kind of combine? And I can't tell you that I got to like a good map of those two, but like that would be, I think, a fun exercise if I was teaching like a management course, or if I was teaching a be a boss kind of course. It would be a fun assignment to have students take this model and her description of each of these things, take a version of the 6 thinking hats, like a reduced down version, and say, how do these two things overlap and how do these two things align with each other? Because I think there'd be a lot of overlap there in terms of how we work through that process with a team.
Yeah, potentially. I didn't think of it that way, but I could see that for sure.
Yeah.
This episode of Bookworm is brought to you by AeroPress. I travel quite a bit. In fact, I just got back from a trip to Boise for the Craft and Commerce Conference. But it can be tough to find good coffee when you're traveling, especially if you're a coffee snob like me. I've tried bringing my own coffee gear, but it ends up taking quite a bit of room, which is why I was really excited to try the new AeroPress Go Plus, an all-in-one portable coffee maker which brews exceptionally smooth, bitter-free coffee and includes a tumbler, making it the perfect travel-friendly all-in-one portable coffee maker solution. It really is the perfect coffee solution for life on the go. I love how the whole system all fits together. The AeroPress itself, the scoop for your coffee, the stir stick, and the filters all fit inside of a custom-made tumbler, which allows you to take your coffee on the go. I used this on my trip to Boise, and it was great. It allowed me to bring great-tasting coffee to the venue instead of having to drink the stuff that was sitting in the hot pots for hours. And what I love about the AeroPress method is that it consistently makes great coffee. It combines the best qualities of a few different brewing methods into a single cup. A little bit of French press, a little pour over, a little espresso, and the result is always great coffee that's easy to make on the go. It's also extremely forgiving, so it is genuinely difficult to make a bad cup of coffee with an AeroPress. If you want great coffee for your active lifestyle, I highly recommend this AeroPress Go Plus. It's really great. And we've got an incredible offer for our audience on the Go Plus. So go to aeropress.com/bookworm. That's AEROPRESS.com/bookworm and use the promo code bookworm and you can save 20% off of your order. That's aeropress.com/bookworm and be sure to use the code bookworm at checkout to save 20%. It's time to say goodbye to crappy coffee and say yes to better adventures fueled by better coffee. We thank AeroPress for their support of the Bookworm podcast.
All right, I'm good to move on to part 2, the tools and techniques.
All right. Part 2 is, as you said, tools and techniques. And this part I feel like is going to go quicker than the previous part. There's a lot of discussion on the philosophical stuff in the first part. And there's a lot of tactical stuff in this second part, which some of it I think is good. Some of it I think is has room for improvement, shall we say. But for the most part, it's pretty solid. If you were looking for a textbook on I'm starting a company and I have a team, what now? This is Running Teams for Dummies, essentially, the second part of this. This is a great place to start. So yeah, there's chapter 5 is relationships, chapter 6 is guidance, chapter 7 is team, and chapter 8 is results. And this is really getting into the nitty gritty of how, what we mentioned at the very beginning, the boss is someone who offers guidance for a team to help them achieve results, how you practically do that in the day-to-day. I don't think that this part necessarily even needs the radical candor part from the philosophy, but if you embrace this stuff with that emphasis on radical candor, it makes this a lot more effective. Now, I have a single piece of this that I really want to kind of nitpick, but I'll defer to you at first. Is there anything from this that really just jumped out to you, Cory, that you want to discuss?
Yeah, before I do the jump out, is normally I'm the more practical the better, right? Like I like thinking about the theory stuff, and I like thinking about those things, but usually I relate better, read with more engagement the practical side. This might be the exception to that. Like this book, for some reason, I felt like we were almost too in the weeds, or maybe my roles to date and current role is just kind of too far from this. It wasn't that any of it was bad. It was more of just okay, like, yep, okay, yep. Like, and I kept finding myself going like, okay, this is fine. Okay, this is fine. This is fine. Like, that's a good idea, but I don't really have any chance to really apply that.
Yeah.
There were those that happened a lot through 5, 6, 7, and 8 for me, which it made it feel kind of like a slog, like to work through part 2. Like part 2 just felt long. Now, if I was a manager or a boss, like specifically, I could easily see myself, like you said, using this as a reference or a textbook of like, how would I implement this and how would I do this in my current context? Those type of things. Now, there are a couple things that stood out to me. So, well, let me say the bad thing first. I don't like at all the guidance equals praise, criticism, get from, give to, encourage between. Like there's a table where she like kind of maps this whole thing out, and she kind of follows the table as you go. I don't like that at all. Like, I just think it's very, very like not confusing, but I just don't think it's as effective as she means it to be. And maybe that was just me. Maybe I didn't like grasp it enough at the beginning, but I wasn't a big fan of that. I love the idea of fix-it weeks. Oh my goodness, I love the idea of fix-it weeks, where you just take a period of time and you go, we're going to fix all the problems right now. We're not going to focus on anything new. We're going to fix all the problems right now. I don't think a week is necessary in my context, but like fix-it days where, every so many weeks in class, I go, students, we need to fix things. And we just have a fix-it session, right? Where we fix all the issues. That was one of the huge takeaways for me. The other thing I liked about this was in the results section. So chapter 8, I liked working through each of those meeting types and relating it back to the get stuff done wheel about this is why we would use this meeting type. This is why we would use this meeting type. I thought that had a lot of applicability more broadly. Like, oh, if you want to do the following things, have this style of a meeting. If you want to do the following things, have this style of a meeting. I thought those were my two like kind of big takeaways from the second part.
Yeah, interesting. So I get the perspective, and I guess I recognize my bias a little bit coming into this now, because essentially what that part is, it's very prescriptive, and it's very much, for lack of a better term, I think what people would call that is a business operating system. So this is a lot like, have you heard of EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System?
No.
That's Gino Wickman, and I'm forgetting the other person's name, but was made popular in a book called Traction, which I've read, and then also there's another one, Rocket Fuel, which kind of describes the EOS system and the relationship between the visionary and the integrator. And these are both like, so those are both books that pertain to EOS, and EOS is something that a lot of small businesses, it seems like, try to implement. But there are lots of other business operating systems out there. Another one that comes to mind is Scaling Up by Vern Harnish. And that was something that I came across when I was working with the agent efficiency team. I actually really like that one. But all of these are essentially designed to give you a firmware for your organization that when this happens, this happens. And what that does is it alleviates a lot of the decision making. And there are many different business operating systems, and there are many pros and cons to different business operating systems. And I think a lot of businesses try a lot of business operating systems trying to find the one specific system that is going to make everything work. I kind of think that when it comes to running a business, much like using a task manager, you have to find something that works for you. And a big part of that is the culture that you have developed, either intentionally or unintentionally. And so that's where the whole first part of the book comes in my opinion, is like, this is all the stuff that needs to be there in the bedrock of the culture in order for anything else to work. So essentially, there's two different books here, in my opinion. There's the Radical Candor framework, and this is kind of like if you want to build a culture that you could use with any business operating system, this is what you use. And then you get into the second section, and I hadn't really recognized this until you started calling out some specific things, but this is a lot longer. It is very prescriptive. There's a lot of details in here, and essentially this is how she runs her companies. From all the different things that she's learned, all the different places, but she even calls out multiple times throughout the book that this is going to be different places. What worked at Google was not, well, that was frowned upon at Apple, and vice versa. Different cultures, different leaders. You got to figure out what works. And there is the issue, I think, with this section is I won't say issue. I'll just say that you got to be careful with this, because anytime you encounter a system like this, I don't think this is Kim Scott's intention, but this is how these types of books read. It's like, I have this experience. I am the guru. Just do this. And it's not that simple. You have to figure out what of this you want to apply. Now, there are certain things in here that are great. And I think that's where, if you're a C-level employee or the owner of a small company, or even a manager or a leader at any level, you could go through this and be like, well, that's a good idea. I could see how that fits. We're not really going to do that. Oh, but that sounds awesome. We should implement that tomorrow. And my advice would be, those are the things to take from this section of the book. But I will say, because I have a lot of experience with these different business operating systems, that what she's sharing here is pretty solid advice. Like, this has got a lot of overlap in a lot of different areas. She frames some things a little bit differently. The one specific thing that I wanted to talk about was the hiring process, because this is an area of interest to me. But before we get there, anything else that you wanted to talk about, just in terms of like the prescriptive nature of the system that she's talking about here?
No, I don't think so. I'm intrigued to hear your hiring process thoughts.
Okay. Well, okay. So there's some context, I guess, that people need to understand with my perspective on the hiring process. I grew up in family business. My dad developed assessment and skill building tools for one of the areas was emotional intelligence. And there were corporations like Michelin Tire and Apple that used our emotional intelligence tools in their hiring process. The validity of those assessments is kind of what sets them apart. There was 140 plus doctoral level papers and books written on the specific assessments that my dad developed and used. So there's lots and lots of research behind it. And then also the sample size. I think it's like 8.5 million people who have gone through it or something like that. It's big. So it's not just like, I made this survey and people seem to like it.
Yeah.
That's my issue with a lot of like the assessments that we come across, and a lot of these books that we read is like, no, you just had an idea and made a Facebook quiz to tell a story. Yep. So that being said, emotional intelligence, a lot of the research that I grew up around showed that the things that really are going to make somebody successful are not the academic or the hard skills. It's the soft skills that are a lot harder to measure. things like resilience, things like empathy, drive strength, assertion versus deference, all that kind of stuff. So you can, though, if you have the right tools, assess and develop those skills. So that is a very important part of the hiring process for me. So let's just talk through the different steps that she's got here in her recommended hiring process. You start with the job description where, let's see, I have a typo here. You define the team as rigorously as you define skills to minimize bias. What did I mean to type there? I'm guessing this is where some of the culture stuff comes in. This is going to be the things that you're looking for in terms of radical candor, like that type of stuff. When I applied for the David Perel job, they actually called out radical candor. Like that's what this is in my opinion. You've got the skills there, but you also this is the type of person that we're looking for in this role. And then you want to build skill assessments to minimize your bias from the interview process. But not just the academic skills, I would argue, not just using the emotional intelligence assessment that my dad developed, but I've used that in the hiring process with people. And every time I've done it, people are like, oh my gosh, I can totally see this. This makes so much sense. This is why that person said that in the interview. I see what's going on here. Right. And then you use the same interview committee for multiple candidates to allow for meaningful comparison. You have casual interviews which reveal more about the candidates than the formal ones. You make those interviews productive by jotting down your thoughts right away. And if you're not daring to hire the person, then don't make them an offer. So there's some good stuff in here. There are some additional things that I would add to this process. One of the books that I read was a book called Top Grading. How are you familiar with this?
I'm not, no.
Okay, so top grading, again, is a whole system that I think is honestly overkill. But there's one piece of top grading which is pretty brilliant, in my opinion. It's called the threat of reference check. And so what you do at the very beginning, and the way we implemented this at the day job was we had a Calendly link that people could use. We looked at the resumes on Indeed and people we wanted to interview. We sent them a link, and in the little Calendly link, there's a box they have to check that says essentially, as part of our interview process, we require you to set up a call with a former boss or manager. If asked to do so, are you willing to arrange such a call? Now, the trick is that you don't actually have to arrange that call, because if they say no, then you ask why. All right. If they say yes, then that just instantly injects some truth serum into the rest of the interview conversation, and they say they tell the truth because they know in the back of their head that you may actually try to verify this. So you're not getting duped by somebody who just can nail an interview. Mm-hmm. And then from there, after that, when we did the interviews, the people, I had some specific questions that I asked, which are kind of off the wall questions, which people always were like, oh, that's interesting. But everyone involved in the hiring process was like, yeah, that was really cool. Like we got more out of those types of questions than the standard ones that you would ask in a 20, 30-minute interview. And then we would invite them to take this emotional intelligence assessment. We'd always say it's not a pass fail. There's no right, wrong. We just have a heavy emphasis on our culture. These are the things that are important to us. And we want to make sure that this is a win-win situation, that this is a good fit for you. And so people would take the assessment and we'd get it back. And because I've seen thousands of them, I knew the patterns to look for. This person isn't going to be happy here long-term because this job is for this, but ultimately their drive strength is off the charts and their empathy is low. Like they're not going to get along well with the team coming in at this low-level position, that sort of thing. And that's not what's the word I'm looking for? Deal breaker. Yeah. It's just another data point. And you get enough of these data points and you get an idea for like, okay, is this person really going to be a good fit? It's a lot harder to measure, but it can be done. And if you have all these pieces that you fit together, then you can significantly increase your hit rate when it comes to hiring, which is really important because mishiring is the most expensive mistake you can make.
Oh my, yes.
You hire somebody, you spend months probably training them to do this job. They're finally at the point where they can do it. And then it has never been a good fit and you didn't realize that and they quit and you got to start all over. Yep. You really got to make sure that you're getting the right person. And it's not as simple as like well, this is our culture. This is what we do. This is who we are. You got to ask about them. You got to make sure that this is a heck yes from their perspective as well. And they may just say heck yes because they need a job.
Yep.
Right. So you have to kind of tease through this and figure out, is this really going to be a match?
Yeah. The part of this that resonated the most with me were the interview, but not formally, like steps of it, like taking them to breakfast, take them to lunch, go on just a random walk, in the middle, so like one of the things we'll do is we'll tour people around campus, and it's to show them campus, but two, different conversations happen when you're walking around campus looking at buildings and students are around and all that stuff than they happen in a boardroom or in like a classroom or a meeting room. And I've seen this so many times where she calls out a couple different times where she found out some pretty drastic or stark things, walking somebody to the parking lot, or somebody she knows would always walk a candidate to the parking lot because they would learn a bunch of things. The number of times that happens is unbelievable. You're like, wait a minute, that interview was like fantastic. And then like they drop this bomb just randomly. Like you didn't ask any questions, you didn't do anything, but this bomb drops and you're like, wow, that stinks, because they were looking really good. And then, there's this thing that where it's a culture fit, or it's something about credentials, or they're, the last person they worked with or whatever. So I like that. I thought that was a good section.
Awesome. And I did find the word I was looking for the job description: define team fit as rigorously as you define skills to minimize bias.
Team fit.
Like
nice.
Team Phi. What the?
Nice.
Yeah. I mean, there's lots of other good stuff in here, but I think that's probably good. Like absentee management versus partnership versus micromanagement. But as it pertains to the discussion,
what did you think of that table? I'm intrigued by what you thought of that table.
Sure. I thought it was good. I think obviously partnership is the gold standard. And then in the table, they're essentially comparing the bad versions of both absentee management and micromanagement. Just to give some examples, like for absentee management, it's hands off, ears off, mouth off. Micromanagement is hands on, ears off, mouth on. And partnership is hands on, ears on, mouth off. So they're juxtaposing these things side by side, and that's important. I like this table a lot, and I like the things that you can glean from looking at them side by side. I don't think it's a comprehensive, this is everything you need to know about these three different areas, but it does a good job of communicating pretty clearly what absentee management looks like versus partnership, what that looks like, versus micromanagement, what that looks like. Yeah. And again, it's just one small piece to the puzzle, but it is a good table. I don't have a picture of the table, but I did break down the different sections in my mind map with all the different criteria underneath there, because I think it will be a handy reference.
Yeah, the reason I asked you about this, I like this table because this one's an easy one to print out, put on the wall, or put in your little, like, am I being a good manager binder, where you scroll through this every so often, every month or whatever. And it's like, okay, am I hands on, ears on, mouth off? Am I leading collaborative goal setting? Am I sharing relevant context as appropriate? Like, it's an easy one to go down that middle column in particular and just be like, am I doing the following things? So from an accountability standpoint, I like that one as I think about like moving into a management role.
Yeah, agreed. One last thing from chapter 8, it kind of ends. This is the last chapter in this section. And she does a good job of explaining this, but it's a detail that can be lost if you're just glossing through or skimming through the book. She mentions that as it pertains to results specifically, that culture eats strategy for lunch.
You've said this many times.
Yeah, the culture for an organization is so important, and it's so hard to get right, and it's really hard to create something that isn't ingrained in who you are, which is why, going back to the previous discussion or the previous section, I was talking about how radical candor, if this is something you're going to implement, can't be something that you do once in a while. The core values that you have in your organization can't be things that you practice once in a while. It can't just be, this is what we want to do when it's convenient. It has to be, everything that is not in alignment with this is an automatic no. It has to be like the ruthless elimination of everything counter to this culture. The minute that you start to tolerate something else. Forgive the analogy, but this is really what it is. It's like cancer cells. If you don't get rid of them, they're going to multiply. And the longer that you wait, the bigger the problem becomes. And now you've got to amputate part of your organization, or you're going to lose part of your organization just because you've allowed this thing to fester and you never dealt with it. That sounds extreme, but it's the truth. I believe it in every single situation. There is no thing that is little and benign if it is counter to your culture. You cannot sweep that stuff under the rug. You have to deal with it.
Okay, so here's a question for you. If you're starting a company, running a company, and you've got 10 employees, are you implementing the radical candor approach?
Absolutely, but I think it's easier to do at the beginning, like before you have the 10 employees. So one of the things that I'm starting to do now is I'm starting to build out my org chart, not in terms of this person does this, but these are the different positions in the Mike Schmidt's universe, like community manager, YouTube editor, all that kind of stuff. And then you can plug people into those different spots as your team and organization grows. But along with that is, these are the values. This is the manifesto. This is who we are, what we do, who we exist to help, how we intend to do that, how we measure our success. That stuff's got to be crystal clear. And then the core values, obviously, that's the decision-making framework for everybody in the organization, because you don't want to micromanage and say, well, this is the right thing to do here. You want to say, do what you think is best in accordance with these values. And it's got to be real clear. This is what this value looks like.
Yeah.
And if you try to layer that on top of people who have been there for a while, what you are competing with is, well, it's not the way we used to do it. You're right. That isn't the way that we used to do it. We've turned a new page. It's essentially like we're a new organization, a new team right now. Forget everything that you knew. We are starting over.
Yeah.
And that's really hard to do.
That's hard to do, yeah.
All right. Should we go to the next section, getting started?
We should.
All right. And I think this part's going to go fairly fast because I don't have a whole lot here. This is basically a checklist for how you would start implementing this. I guess we could break down this piece by piece. First thing you should do, start asking your team to criticize you. I like that. That is essentially the best way to, that is absolutely the best way to start this. Number 2, you have to prove you can take it before you start dishing it out. Begin having career conversations with your teams. Perfect your one-on-one meetings. Start improving impromptu feedback. Step back and see what's working. Return to guidance. Fight meeting proliferation. Kill the meetings.
Yeah, exactly.
Plan for the future of your team. Return to guidance. Walk around. Revamp your processes. I think this is a really good checklist, but there's so much here. And again, like you have to really buy into everything that she's talking about in the previous section in order to have a visual of how this stuff gets applied. But I think down the road, if you're building your team and you've dialed in your business operating system, whether it's this one or a different one, this checklist is helpful to go back and revisit and say, okay, so we've done this. Oh, the one-on-one meetings, that's the one. We really got to nail this down. And we got to craft a better agenda so that those are better or something. And then once you get to the end, you go back to the beginning and you see if anything's drifted, if anything needs to be fixed, because that's going to happen.
Yeah, I think this section lost me in terms of this is written for somebody who's in the weeds of managing. They're in the weeds of being a boss. And it's like, and if you're not there, this is fine, but there's not a ton of like, what do I do with this? It's more of just like, okay. So it's like this whole section was, I won't say it was lost to me, but it's like I didn't get a ton out of it other than what you said is the checklist, right? Like, okay, there's a checklist. At some point I might look at that in the future, but as of right now, I don't know. Didn't really get a ton out of that section.
I imagine the next 2 sections will be similar.
They are very similar.
All right. So let's go to the next section then. This is the afterword to the revised edition. And this is where they talk about 2 ways to increase self-awareness and relational awareness. And that is through storytelling and role-playing. Now, they give very specific exercises here, which I think are very helpful. There's 4 different stories. There's the radical candor story, the obnoxious aggression story, the ruinous empathy story, the manipulative insincerity story. But then there's also the feedback triangle as it pertains to the role plays. This is where you get into a group of 3. You describe some feedback you should have given to someone but didn't, and then one colleague plays the role of the intended feedback recipient. The other is simply an observer. And I can totally see how practicing that could help people learn and develop situational awareness for when and how to practice radical candor. But I don't think that this is something that is high on my list of things to implement. Maybe I will change my tune once my team starts growing. And if I recognize that we're having trouble implementing this, then this is the kind of thing, on your offsite that you practice
Yeah.
for an hour or so. But I don't know. I personally at this moment believe that you can communicate what radical candor is and encourage a culture where it can be practiced without having to do a whole bunch of role play. And I don't know about you, but just the whole idea of role play, I don't want to do that.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of that either.
Yeah, I don't know why. I think as she walks through the exercise, like, yeah, I totally see the value in that, but I think it just is a little bit difficult and uncomfortable to put people in that situation. Okay, we're going to do this now. I think it's better if they can just get it and they can see it day to day, and the best way to do that is to model it yourself.
Well, and this is the afterword to the revised edition. So what I got out of this was, all right, we've been coaching a bunch of teams, or we've been coaching a bunch of bosses on this. Here is something that would help the majority of people. So not everybody can come to coaching. So I'm going to distill down what we do in coaching into a couple different, takeaways. And I'm going to put that into some stories, and I'm going to put that into a couple different frameworks, storytelling and role playing. And I think that's good, but I don't think if you're in the situation where you're having these problems or wanting to apply this, I just don't think it adds a ton to the narrative of the book, if you will, right, or the major content of the book.
I agree with you. I don't mind that it's in an afterword. I do think that this could be a helpful little bonus for somebody in the right situation who's reading this book. But I think for most people, yeah, you don't really need this. So it's fine where it is. And then the last one is the bonus chapter. And I don't know really what to say about the bonus chapter. They've got elements of a formal review process, which again are good. This is essentially a way to do a prescriptive way to do these regular performance reviews. And I think regular performance reviews are awesome and very important. And that's the place where you really have to be clear on the numbers. Like, this is why you are or are not meeting expectations. So they have like the number of ratings. I guess that's worth calling out. The number of ratings, they say 4 is ideal, because then you can't just pick the one in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So they say not okay, okay for now, good, or great. And depending on which middle one you choose, you're leaning one way or the other. So at least the person knows where they stand. I think that was my big takeaway from this. But there's some good elements here. I have no desire whatsoever to implement that exact review process, though.
And I think, again, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but if I'm wanting to instill, or I have a radical candor culture in my company, and I want to specifically look at performance reviews from that radical candor lens, this is a great chapter, right? This is a great bonus chapter. But here's where I like that she put it as a bonus chapter, because if I'm not in that context, boom, it's a bonus chapter. I don't need it. It wasn't essential to the book. I can just kind of not throw it away, but I can just ignore it and not feel bad as I read the book. But if I really care about performance reviews, boom, like I read this chapter and probably get a ton out of it.
The thing is, with performance reviews, what most people will do is they'll just use whatever tool comes with whatever business operating system that they're using. Like the one that I've used is, the one that I like is part of a software product called 90.io, which is a little bit clunky dashboard system for implementing EOS. And I say clunky just because it doesn't automatically integrate with all of the different things, but that's kind of the point. Like, there's dashboards in there. You identify the people that are a part of your leadership team. It's essentially software for your leadership team. The rest of the team isn't using it. And so you have your leadership meetings and you discuss things. And then if there's trickle down action items, you can just roll those down to the team leaders in those different areas. But part of it is these dashboards, and everyone has this number that they're responsible for. And then that gets pulled into automatically into these templates that they use for their performance reviews. And they're good. I do like the number of ratings. I feel like that is something that would be cool to implement to that, but there's no way you're going to to code your own thing just so you can have 4 different options instead of 3 when you do your performance reviews.
Yeah.
So you're going to look at that and be like, well, that'd be nice, but we already have this tool and this is what we're using.
I would love to have a role where I'm the boss who has to do performance reviews to get the other side of this perspective. Performance reviews frustrate me, like, because it's a matter of, and I know this isn't true, so I'm not being fair. It seems like that legal thing that you do, that way when you promote people or fire people or whatever it is, like, we have evidence and documentation. Because, like, in my style, like, you're an employee of mine. If I'm your boss, you and I are talking so frequently, and we are in communication in a way that's like, you're constantly having a performance review, right? Like, this isn't something that we have to do or we have to sit down and make it this formal mechanism. And that's why the word formal really matters, right? Like we don't have to do this formal mechanism. Now, I know that's not realistic, and I know that every company is going to have these, and especially larger companies, that you have to have these because you can't have that relationship with everybody in your organization. But at the same time, I have this aversion to formal performance reviews because I feel like we're checking boxes. That way, if down the road we need to call back on this, we've checked the right boxes, and we can call back on it. So I have an aversion towards performance reviews, like formal performance reviews to begin with. So,
well, you're right. That is one of the functions of them. They are kind of a cover your butt mechanism. The best version of this is that you do have the regular relationship with your direct reports, and everything that you share on the performance review is not a surprise. They've heard it a dozen times already. In reality, that doesn't happen very often, which is why radical candor is important, because there's a lot of people who just don't care enough about the team that they're working with. You really need to care.
Yes.
And then you really need to, because you care, challenge directly. Yep. I mean, going back to the very beginning of the book, it's a very simple message. And I like the way, though, that it trickles all the way down through like everything in the organization. You can see how all the puzzle pieces fit together. But if you're going to boil it down into what is this book about, that's it. Yeah. It's that simple framework way back at the beginning. And it's really powerful if you implement it right.
Yeah.
Woo, that was a lot.
It was a lot. All right. Action items.
All right.
What are they, Mike? What are your action items?
So let me search my node file here, but I have a feeling I know what I'm, yep, that's what I thought. I have no action items from this.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm in a similar one, except I have one, but it's
okay.
Not like a really, good one. When the fall semester starts, I think I'm going to take the Radical Candor framework and I'm going to put it on the wall, and I'm going to talk about it with at least the senior capstone design course, because the senior capstone design course is it runs more like a company than a classroom. So if I'm going to model it in any one of them, I think that would be the fun one to model it in, just to see how it goes. And I'm going to emphasize the axes, right? So the care personally and then challenge directly. I'm not going to emphasize the quadrants as much, just because if it comes up and we get into that, maybe. But really what I want to do is I want to see what it's like to have a group of students work through this, where we're trying to care personally and challenge directly, and what that looks like for a semester. So it's a very, very, kind of fluffy pie in the sky one that won't be implemented for another 3 months. But at the same time, I think that is my action item out of this, is put it in the lab and see what people think.
All right. Well, I like that, and I want to know how that goes. Unfortunately, we have to wait a bit. But
yeah, we're gonna have to need to set a reminder, or else I'm gonna forget to talk about it.
Yeah. All right, so let's get into style and rating. My book, so I will go first. I absolutely loved this book. The fact that I don't have an action item with it is not an indication of the value of this book. I think it's kind of interesting that there was so much prescriptive stuff in there, and I didn't walk away with, this one thing I absolutely want to do. But like I shared in the episode, I think that's because I've got a lot of context with a lot of these business operating systems. And the thing that really stands out to me is the philosophy piece at the beginning. It was really cool to see how she implemented radical candor and all the tools and frameworks that she used in the second part of the book, and then the other chapters at the end. But that's not the thing that is really going to stick with me. The thing that's going to stick with me also is not even just the model that she shared with that grid. It's all of the examples and everything that she shared in terms of this is what manipulative insincerity looks like, or this is what obnoxious aggression looks like. Going through this, I feel like I understand I had an understanding of what radical candor was before. And I think for the most part, I was spot on in my understanding of it. But I feel like I understand it at a whole different level because of this. And even with the second part of the book, I mentioned like the first part of the book is really the one that's going to stick with me. But the reason that it sticks with me is because she so closely tied it into all of the other practical examples of how she managed her companies. That really was an effective model. And I think that this book is 5 stars for the right person. So I'm going to put it at 5 stars with an asterisk, I guess, because if you aren't in a position or to lead a team, or that's not something that you aspire to do, there's probably limited value in this for you. If you're low on the totem pole, for lack of a better term, and you're just looking for something interesting to read because you want to develop yourself, this is not the book for you. This is really something that you want to roll out across your team or organization, but that's really hard to do from the bottom up. So it's still valuable to read, I would argue, and I would do it and then have discussions with the people above you. Maybe if they are absolutely against the idea of radical candor, you've just proven to yourself that this isn't the right place for you because you actually care about people, or because you care enough about the long-term health of the organization to actually bake in a consideration of the results that people are getting. I don't know, but like that's what the superstars want, is they want to be a part of those teams that are going to do amazing things. Mm-hmm. You kind of owe it to your people to set them up for a chance to do that, I feel. And so this is a really powerful book. I feel like this is a much needed book. I wish I could just open up the heads of like every business owner in the world, every manager who has at least 3 or 4 people reporting to them, and download this matrix style into their psyche, but that's not going to happen. Nope, not gonna so happen. In the meantime, I will champion for this book and say, Kib Scott, you go girl, and give this 5 stars.
Okay. All right. You said a thing in your style and rating that I didn't remember until you said it, but she is very, very adamant multiple times in the book about like, if you're not an organization that has radical candor, you should leave that organization, or you should think about going to a different organization, which I thought that was a very, very like strong opinion. Not that I agree with it or that I disagree with it, but more that she is like sold out on that. Like she is really, really sold out on that. So that was something that made me think about it. Now let's go to style and rating. I am the opposite of you on this book. I may come to eat my words here in the next, minute and a half or however long this is going to go. I did not like this book. I think it's very valuable. I think what was said from an implementation standpoint, this is the kind of organization I want to work at. This is the way I want people to interact. This is what I want to have happening 100% of the time. I did not like this book at all. I just didn't like it. I mean, I don't know. And maybe this is an indication. So for those of you a little behind the scenes, you finished this book so fast. Was that because you really liked it, or was that because you had a bunch of time between when we started this one and when you finished it? Like, or both?
No, I started reading it when I was traveling.
Okay.
And just kept cranking.
Okay. I was like, well, maybe he just liked it so much that he like couldn't put it down, because I was the exact opposite. I was like, man, I got to read Radical Candor again. Man, I got to read Radical Candor. And that's the way it was. And again, it wasn't really because I didn't agree with what was being said. It was more of just something about it. I can't put my finger on it. It was just like, so maybe I'm that person you're talking about that would definitely not rate this a 5-star book. But what I could easily see happening 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, is you and I have a conversation again about radical candor. And I'm like, that was one of the most impactful books that I've ever read. And I'm applying and implementing so many of those principles that I've gone and reread it, right? Like that I've gone and reread it, and it's a completely different experience for me. So my rating on this book is a 2 out of 5, right? I mean, it's like, I just did not enjoy the book. It felt like a slog to read. I wasn't into it at all. And I kind of feel bad, right? But at the same time, that's just my feeling on it. Like, I came in going like, I wonder what Mike's rating is going to be, because mine is going to be low, right? Like for me to get to a 2, I mean, that's fairly low, for my rating system. So yeah, I'm a 2, and I can't put my finger on exactly what it was. Maybe it's just the fact that I'm not in like boss/management mode enough to really, really appreciate this book, but that's where I am.
No, I totally get it. I think I am a pretty weird person where like I enjoy the, for lack of a better term, dry business books. That's what I prefer to read.
Yeah, okay.
I like to know how those teams, high functioning teams and organizations work. And then again, you know, I've got a whole bunch of business context. I've read the different business operating systems books, which totally I can see how that improves my the standing of the book in my opinion. I can definitely see, and specifically with you, where there are places to implement it, but this really, it doesn't affect your day to day. You're not going to go to the head of your university and be like, "Hey, we need radical candor now." No, like that's not how things are done in the world where you live.
Would I like to? Yes. Is that a reality right now? No, it's just not. It's just not going to happen. But one of the things that makes me happy about this is I think this is the first book you and I have significantly disagreed on.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So that makes me happy. Like we're human. Like, you know, we're gonna have differences of opinion every so often. Like significant difference of opinion.
I agree, and it's not a surprise to me that we had a difference of opinion on this particular book. You know, I'm going through this and thinking of all these different scenarios, practical examples where like I could implement this tomorrow. You know, because this is the world where I live. And I can totally empathize with someone who's just like, yeah, this is good information, but maybe someday.
I'm better off for having read it, but like I would not want to read this book again. I'm just good.
Totally
like,
get it. Totally get it.
When you say put it on the shelf, I'm like, well, I'm gonna put it on like the shelf behind the other books. You know.
Cool. Yeah. So continuing this conversation, just to reiterate, that asterisk is really important with that 5-star rating. If you're just going through the list of like, oh, Mike rated 5.0, I'm going to buy that book. No, definitely make sure this is something that's going to be interesting and applicable to you.
Think through that one.
Then
first.
Get the book and read it. But for me, you know, this is a great book.
Well, and it's also nothing to do with the writing, right? Like it was clear, organized, the stories were good, all of that stuff. Man, I just didn't like the book. It just wasn't my cup of tea. But okay. Yeah, there you go.
All right. So let's put Radical Candor way back there on the back shelf, at least for Cory. Yep. What's next?
All right. So my next book is called Co-Intelligence, Living and Working with AI by Ethan Mollick. Now, Mike found this book, and I was struggling to figure out a book, but he remembered that I was interested in AI, and I had pitched him a whole bunch of AI books, I don't know, a couple months ago. And he was like, hey, this new book just came out, right? So it came out in April of this year, and it's by a Wharton professor. He also has a Substack newsletter that's described as the playbook, or a definitive playbook for working, learning, and living in the new age of AI. So it's called Co-Intelligence, Living and Working with AI, and we're going to see how AI applies to our lives and how it might apply to our lives in the future. So I'm excited about this one. I've wanted to read more on AI, and kind of I like the idea that it's going to impact like how. It's going to talk about how this stuff impacts us as humans. So I like that. How about you?
All right. Hopefully you like that one better than you liked Radical Candor. I feel bad. I made a recommendation for Cory and he didn't like it. Now I'm going to be a little bit more wary in the future.
No. Don't do that. I mean, I told you I'm better off for it. It's just a matter of didn't like it.
All right. After that, we're going to read the new Ryan Holiday book, which is out. So Right Thing Right Now by Ryan Holiday. This is the Stoic Virtues series. I'm excited about this one, asterisk. I was Ryan Holiday's biggest fan when we started getting into the Stoic Virtue series. I feel like these have not quite been to the same level, so I'm going into this one a little bit side eye, I have
Okay.
to admit. But it is Ryan Holiday, and this is Bookworm, so of course we're going to cover it.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. Got any Gap books?
No, I'm just gonna tell you right now. I just came off of a crazy May and June or partial June of traveling, and I'm not even attempting any Gap books right now. Like, no.
Okay. That's fair. I have one that I'm going to try and read. It's smaller, and it was just released called Simple Marketing for Smart People. And this is a book that is written by someone named Billy Broas. And this is the guy who does the marketing for Tiago Forte. In fact, it says Billy Broas with Tiago Forte on the cover.
Oh, nice.
I just got this one in the mail yesterday. I pre-ordered it, and I'm looking forward to going through this one. What I understand of Billy Broas is that the marketing is very anti the traditional what you would think of as internet marketing. I don't know. I've been a fan of Tiago's for a while, and I think all of his marketing materials, his sales pages and stuff look great. They're not insulting to anyone.
Yeah.
They're not trying to trick you into anything. It's not like buy now and you get all of these bonuses, $3,000 value, only $19.99.
Yeah, I know.
So I could use that sort of stuff for my creator business, and I'm hoping that this book will be helpful.
Nice.
All right.
We did it.
Well, thanks everyone for listening along. If you want to support the show, we would really appreciate it. You can do that by going to patreon.com/bookwormfm. And for $7 a month, you can get access to a Bookworm wallpaper and a couple of additional feeds. There is a bootleg feed that gets released right after we record this. So if you want to get the episodes early, that's the best way to do it. And then we also have a pro show that gets released usually a day early, and that has a separate pro topic. Today we talked about artificial intelligence and had some hot takes on WWDC announcements. So if you want access to those feeds, you can sign up at patreon.com/bookwormfm.
And to those of you who have signed up, thank you very much. That means a lot, and it supports the show and supports us keeping things going. So thanks so much.
Absolutely. If you're reading along with us, pick up Co-Intelligence by Ethan Mollick, and we'll talk to you in a couple of weeks.